I woke up on an unfamiliar sofa. My head was pounding, my dress was a wrinkled mess, and a bitter taste coated my dry lips and throat. My eyes stung, both from dryness and from a fear that made my palms slick with cold sweat. I couldn't remember how I'd left the club, couldn't remember what I'd said, and I certainly couldn't understand why I was in the apartment of a man I barely knew through my older sister. When I managed to stand, I found my phone was dead, my purse was wide open, and the man was telling me I had passed out in the taxi, so he'd brought me to his place for safety. All I knew was that I had to leave immediately. My family would be worried sick, but when I walked through my own front door, they were already waiting. All of them. My parents, my fiancé. The air was as heavy as if a funeral had just taken place. Not one person asked me what had happened. No one reached out to take my bag, and no one looked at me with an ounce of sympathy. Instead, they held up a photo taken as I was being helped out of the club, a blurry moment, someone's hand resting on my bare back. My sister's voice trembled as if she were the victim, recounting how I had willingly left with him. And him, the man who once called me his entire world, just looked at me like a stranger he needed to discard. I tried to explain, tried to piece together the shattered fragments of my memory, but they wouldn't listen. Every time I opened my mouth, someone else spoke for me. I managed to get out one sentence. Please just check the security cameras at the club, but the words fell into a void, as if they had never been spoken. They chose to believe a picture, a secondhand story, and they decided silence over the truth. I lost my fiancé, my home, my scholarship, and my chance to graduate. In less than 2 days, everything I had built vanished as if it had never existed. I left my home on the very night they should have held me, the night they should have asked if I was hungry, if I was scared, if anyone had hurt me. But instead of those questions, my mother Evelyn sank into a chair, her mascara bleeding down her cheeks, weeping not for me, but for the shame she believed I had brought upon her. She whispered choked accusations, calling me a disgrace to the family, the reason she could no longer hold her head high among her friends and her church prayer group. My father, Richard, stood silently by the fireplace, the red glow of the flames casting a cold fury across his face. His hands were clenched so tightly it looked as if he were strangling the last chance I never had. He didn't say a word, didn't spare me a glance, didn't need an explanation. They didn't need to know anything more, because in their eyes, I was already a conclusion. A verdict delivered by a single photograph and a venomous tale. I walked out of the house I once called home with a ragged cloth bag, a few hastily stuffed clothes, no wallet, no money, and no keys. The wrinkled dress clung to my legs from the night's dew, and the wind cut through my skin, chilling me to the bone. I stood on the sidewalk, the yellow street lights casting a distorted shadow of me on the pavement, and though my head felt like it would split open, it was my heart that was truly fracturing. I thought of Marnie, my best friend since freshman year, but when I got to her East Side dorm, I stood frozen before the door, completely unable to remember the key code. My trembling fingers tapped against the wood, then fell away. I sank onto the steps, wrapping my arms around my knees, biting my lip, forcing myself not to cry, not to break down right now. I had to stay sharp. I had to survive. Even if I was utterly alone. I was once a senior biology major at Greenville College, consistently in the top 3 for 3 years, and was chosen to be the honorary graduation speaker. I had a full scholarship and a plan to move to Charlotte with the man I loved after our spring wedding. I used to think that if I just tried hard enough, everything would fall into place. That family was the one place that would never turn its back on you. But now, in the middle of a cold night, with not a single text message asking if I was okay, I was nothing but a discarded name, a shattered reputation, and a truth that no one was willing to hear. That afternoon had started like any other Friday in November, with a genetics presentation I had spent 3 nights preparing. I was a senior at Greenville College, finishing a grueling semester with an honorary speaking slot secured. In a few more weeks, if nothing changes, I will graduate and move with my fiancé to Charlotte, where we have already scouted apartments near the Research Institute. Everything was on track until I got the text from Betrayal. Come to the club with me tonight, just once. I need to talk. I almost ignored it. Betrayal never invited me anywhere, and she wasn't the type to care about sisterly bonding. Polar opposites, she was a dropout, a former addict, forgiven by our parents countless times, while I had always been the model child, studious and obedient. But maybe it was because of those differences that I always yearned for the day she would see me as a real sister. After a few minutes of hesitation, I agreed, but with a limit in mind. Just for a little while, not too many drinks, and home early. The club was in downtown Greenville, called the Hollow. It wasn't large, but it was packed, and the constant flashing of purple and red lights made me squint the moment I walked in. The air was a mix of sweat, alcohol, and cheap perfume. Betrayal looked like she had stepped out of a magazine, a tight dress, perfectly waved hair, a sharp glint in her eyes. She grabbed my hand and pulled me straight to the bar, waving at the bartender like an old friend before setting 2 margaritas on the counter. "Tonight is for us to finally clear the air," she said. Before I could respond, a second glass was pushed in front of me, then a third. I started to feel lightheaded, the dance floor spinning before my eyes. Unused to hard liquor, I tried to stop, but Betrayal just smirked, whispering, "Loosen up, Maddie. One night of living won't kill you." Amidst the pounding music and strobing lights, I just nodded. As she ordered another drink for me, she tilted her head toward the end of the bar. "See that guy? I'm going to make him mine." I laughed, partly from the alcohol, partly because I thought she was joking. But Betrayal wasn't kidding. She stood up, adjusted her dress strap, and walked straight over to a man sitting alone at a high-top table. He had longish dark hair, a leather jacket, and a lean, sharp look about him. When she came back, the playful look on her face was gone. "He didn't want my number." "He asked for yours." Betrayal's voice was tight, but her eyes looked at me as if I had just betrayed her simply by existing. I offered a weak smile and a few words of encouragement, but she didn't reply. A few minutes later, she said she was going to the restroom. "Then we'll leave." That was the last I saw of Betrayal that night. I sat there, trying to stay coherent amidst the noise and fumes, and waited. 10 minutes, 20, half an hour. I texted her, no response. I called, no answer. Sometime during that wait, I remember drinking something else, though I wasn't sure who gave it to me. My head began to spin violently, the lights seemed brighter than before, and I lost all track of time. As I stumbled out of the club to call a taxi, Jared, a guy who had a brief fling with Betrayal last year, appeared. I don't know what he was doing there, but he recognized me and asked if I was okay. I told him I was getting a ride, and he said he was leaving too, that we could share one. I don't clearly remember nodding. I just remember that as we got to the car, his hand rested lightly on the small of my back. After that, there was only a blank space. When I woke up, I was on a strange sofa, my dress in ruins, my throat burning, and my heart hammering with panic. And everything that happened after that was only what other people said had happened. I left Jared's apartment before the sun was fully up. The streetlights cast trembling shadows from the trees, and each of my footsteps seemed to fall into an invisible, soundless void. My body still ached dully, my head throbbed with each pulse, and my throat was so dry it felt like I hadn't had a drop of water all night. I didn't ask Jared any more questions. I just mumbled a thank you without waiting for a reply, and walked out of that apartment as if escaping a place I never belonged. A fragile hope was the only thing left in my mind. If I got home early, if I explained everything myself, if I was honest and transparent, they would listen. Cameron would listen. He had to. But when I walked into the house, they were all there. My father stood stiffly, his face a mask of tension and judgment. My mother, Evelyn, sat on the edge of her chair, her hands clenched together, her eyes red-rimmed but cold. And Cameron was silent on the opposite side of the room, looking at me as if I were a ghost he'd never known. No one asked if I was all right. No one moved to let me set down my small purse. And no one looked down at the shoes I'd been walking in since dawn. The air was thick, heavy. Brielle emerged last. She didn't look like someone who had been partying all night. She wore a crisp white blouse, her hair in a neat bun, her gaze as cold as glass. She held up her phone, displaying the picture like irrefutable evidence. In it, I was stumbling out of the club, my head lolling toward Jared's shoulder, his hand on my back, a suggestive touch under the dim bar lights. The photo was blurry, grainy, but it was enough to ignite years of pent-up resentment. "You left with my ex-boyfriend," Brielle said, her tone a mixture of pain and steel. "I saw it with my own eyes." One had to tell me. My stomach twisted, a cold knot forming inside me. I opened my mouth to explain, but before I could get a sentence out, Richard let out a sharp, angry sound. "That's enough. Don't disgrace us any further." I said that I had passed out. I begged them to check the club's security cameras, promising to call the manager and do anything to show them I had done nothing wrong. But Evelyn just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Maddie, I'm begging you, stop lying. Do you think we're all fools?" Cameron still said nothing. He took off the engagement ring and placed it on the coffee table. The sound of metal hitting wood was a short, dull thud I would never forget. I tried to grab his hand, but he recoiled as if I were fire. "I don't know who you are anymore," was all he left me with. I turned to Brielle one last time, fighting back tears. "You know what Jared is like. You know I would never." But she stepped closer, her voice as calm as if she were recalling an old dream. "The cameras won't save you, Maddie. Some things are clear enough, just by looking." That sentence was the final verdict, the closing statement in a trial with no lawyer, no witnesses, and no one representing the defendant. And the defendant was me. I walked out of the house with nothing but the loose purse containing a few small items. On the living room table, the engagement ring lay alone, reflecting the lamplight like a cold, lifeless piece of metal, just like the love they had for me. No one said goodbye. No arm reached out to stop me. I was no longer a part of that house. I was just a mistake they needed to erase as quickly as possible. I didn't leave Greenville right away. There was too much I couldn't afford to lose, and I believed there was still a sliver of a chance to turn it all around. That belief was as thin as paper, but I held on. After 3 nights sleeping on a folding chair in a friend's room, my head aching and my stomach in knots, I went to the Hollow, the place where it all began, and the only place that could prove my innocence. I returned alone on a Tuesday afternoon when the club had just opened, the dim lights casting a haze over the empty bar. The manager was a dark-skinned woman in her mid-30s named Jasmine, with a wary but not unsympathetic gaze. When I explained my situation, she looked me up and down, as if checking the validity of my story. "Have you reported this to the police?" I shook my head. "I need to prove it to my family first. To my fiancé." She sighed. "Our cameras save footage for a maximum of 7 days. After that, it gets overwritten. If you really need it, I can let you view it internally. But you have to sign a waiver, no recording, no copying, no publishing." I nodded immediately, without hesitation. Jasmine led me to a small room behind the stage, where security monitors were stacked on top of each other. She rewound the footage till late Friday night, and I saw myself immediately, in the tight black dress, standing by the bar with Betrayal. I shivered, watching myself on the screen as if observing a stranger. The footage spanned nearly an hour, captured from multiple angles. I hadn't snuck out of the club as Betrayal claimed. I stood unsteadily, looking around, then picked up my phone and put it down again. Jared approached from behind, said something, and then supported my shoulder as I nearly collapsed. He guided me out, slowly. There was no kiss, no inappropriate behavior, just his hand on my back to keep me steady. The camera at the front door recorded us leaving in a taxi. I managed to say something. My face was gaunt, my eyes unfocused. I didn't look like a cheater. I asked Jasmine to sign a statement confirming the existence of the video. She agreed to sign an internal report. I kept a copy. It had little legal weight, but it was enough for Cameron to see the truth, if he was willing to look. I also went to the campus hospital, the student health center, and explained that I suspected I had been drugged. After examining the patient, the doctor stated that it was too late for a blood sample to be definitive. Still, they agreed to document my condition: an irregular heartbeat, dehydration, and prolonged signs of disorientation. They printed a full report for me, signed and stamped. I put all those papers into a file folder. It was a thin file, but it was the only thing keeping me sane. I sent a text to Cameron. I have proof. If you want to know the truth, meet me one time, just once. He never replied. 3 days later, I saw him driving with Betrayal in her family's car, passing by the campus. They didn't look at me. Or maybe they did, and pretended not to. That evening, I took all the documents to Evelyn's house. I didn't go inside. I just left an envelope on the doorstep. Inside was the report from Jasmine, the medical report, a screenshot from the club's camera, and a handwritten letter. In the letter, I wrote, "I don't need you to apologize. I need you to know I didn't betray anyone." I left without ringing the bell. The next day, Betrayal sent me a 2-line text. "What you're doing is useless. No one believes you anymore." I stared at that message like it was the final period at the end of a sentence. The accusations had to remain so that later, when they came back, I would remember exactly how cruel they had been. No one came looking for me after that day. Not a single message from my family, from Cameron, from anyone who had ever promised to be there for me. I disappeared from their lives as if I had never existed, as if all our years together were just a mistake that could be deleted with a single click. After mailing the engagement ring back via certified mail and being officially removed from the graduation list for dropping my final semester, I had nothing left to hold on to but a part-time job at a small diner in a neighborhood I'd never visited before. From an honors biology student, I became a name on a work schedule, squeezed between kitchen cleaning shifts and time cards scrawled with a marker. The apartment I lived in was barely bigger than a single room, with peeling paint and a sliding window that shrieked whenever the wind whipped through the hallway. After it rained, the old water stain on the ceiling would darken a little more. I paid rent weekly, in cash, with no contract, and no one asked for my last name or my family status. The landlord called me the quiet brown-haired girl at the end of the hall, and my coworkers at the diner called me Maddie, a fake name I'd used since leaving Greenville. I never corrected them. They could call me whatever they wanted, as long as it wasn't my old name. This name replayed that October night every time it was spoken. My mother's disappointed eyes, my father's cold pointing finger, my sister's theatrical sobs, and Cameron's merciless back as he walked away. I was a prep cook. I cleaned bathrooms and covered holiday shifts. I took every task no one else wanted. not out of ambition, but because I couldn't bear another moment of free time. Free time meant remembering. Free time meant self-blame. Free time meant looking at a calendar and seeing that I no longer existed in anyone's plans. Some days, when my shift ended, I'd step out into the pitch-black alley, open my phone to check for emails about readmission, then quickly close it when I saw another rejection reason. Insufficient credits from dropping the final semester. No longer eligible for financial aid. I used to have a plan, with steps as clear as a chemical formula. Graduate from Greenville College with honors, have a summer wedding at Street. Martha's Church, move to Charlotte with the man I'd loved since childhood, and start a life of teaching or molecular biology research. Everything had been so sure that I'd marked our engagement date in my planner with a red pen as if the future was something that could be programmed. Now, whenever I turn to that page, I see a red smear that has bled onto the next, like blood seeping from a wound that never healed. I used to have parents, 2 sisters, and a lover who held me when panic attacks struck in the middle of the night. I used to have laughter at the dinner table, a permanent seat at family gatherings, and even a wedding dress I had already tried on once, held at the shop by a deposit my mother paid with a cashier's check. It all disappeared in less than 2 days. No warning. No chance to explain. No genuine questions. Just the silence of people who once swore they loved me more than anything. I couldn't bring myself to go back to campus. Couldn't step into another classroom after being thrown out of my home. Every hallway seemed to echo with someone's whisper calling me a traitor. Every lecture hall appeared to hold the gazes of those who once saw me as a role model. I withdrew from my classes without notice, without filling out the official forms, and simply vanished from the system, much like a student who had given up. At first, I thought I'd just take 1 semester off, but 1 semester turned into the next. The professors who once had high hopes for me wrote no more letters of recommendation, and my honorary scholarship was revoked after I failed to submit my final thesis. Do you still remember the last lecture? Marnie asked once during a phone call. She was still at Greenville, still got her degree, still graduated. Of course I do, I replied. I remember every single slide, but I didn't tell her that I couldn't listen to any of my class recordings. Every one of those sounds felt like it was pulling me back to a version of myself I no longer had the strength to face. 2 years passed. No one looked for me. No one asked where I was living, what I was eating, or how I was managing to survive. I was removed from the family group chat, from the school's honor roll, from every place my name had once been mentioned. They didn't just kick me out of the house. They evicted my entire existence from their memories. Until that afternoon, when Cameron showed up at the door of apartment 2C, a place whose address I had never shared with anyone. I opened the door, my hands still smelling of dish soap. A cold wind blew in, chilling the cracked tile by the entryway. He stood there, his hands bare and his eyes red, no longer the person I once knew. I thought I was dreaming, but no dream could make my heart clench in quite this way. Can you just let me talk for a few minutes? His voice was hoarse, low, and broken, as if he were counting each breath. I didn't nod. I didn't shake my head. I just stood there, shielded by the doorframe. Brielle told the truth, he continued. She confessed. About everything. I didn't react. Didn't move. I didn't need to ask what everything was. I had always known. It was just that no one had ever been willing to confirm it. She was jealous, Cameron said. She said she felt overshadowed. She thought if you didn't have me anymore, didn't have the wedding, didn't have the scholarship, it would be easier for her to breathe. I turned my face away, not because I was sad, but because the pain was so sharp I couldn't let anyone see my expression in that moment. I didn't know. No one said anything. No one suspected her. I turned back. I looked him straight in the eye. My voice was dry, but clear. I did. I told you to check the cameras. He didn't answer. Silence. His eyes welled up. His lips pressed into a tight line. I didn't see remorse in his eyes. I just saw emptiness. The door was still only partially open. I stood between him and the apartment, the only place I had been able to call home for 2 years, and I did not invite him in. I asked him one more time, the last time. Why, when I said that, didn't you do it? Cameron bowed his head. No words came out. I gave a slight nod. This is enough to confirm that I understood. Not the reason. But he didn't deserve to be forgiven. I gently pushed the door, not slamming it, not with anger or drama. I just did what they had done to me 2 years ago, closed it, without a word of farewell. When I was little, my mother used to say, if you stay silent when others are wrong, you'll eventually be swallowed by the things no one dares to say. But when I grew up, she was the one who remained silent, utterly silent, when I begged for a chance to be heard, to explain, to clear my name. And now, as the truth found its own way out, that same silence came back to tear apart everything they once thought was solid. I don't know what Betrayal told her new husband. Still, Joshua, the man who had only been in the family for a year, was the first to publicly reveal the truth, not with a dramatic status update or a tell-all interview, but with a simple text message to an old friend who had attended Greenville with me. The news spread like wildfire through the dry grass. A friend of a friend took a screenshot, posted it on an old university Reddit forum, and then it made its way to the alumni Facebook group, where my engagement photo had once been posted, accompanied by hundreds of congratulatory comments. People didn't call for justice. They just sighed and whispered, so that's what happened. But in a small town where everyone knew everyone, those whispers had more power than any courtroom. They didn't explode like a social media scandal. They seeped in slowly, deeply, and couldn't be easily washed away. I didn't have to say a word. I just sat at the bar during my night shift, polishing glasses, and listened as a young coworker whispered to a customer, "That's Maddie. Used to be a star student, but her own sister set her up. Did you hear?" I kept smiling and handed out bills as if nothing had happened. I didn't confirm it, but I didn't deny it either. Evelyn, my mother, was no longer called upon during her charity group meetings. No one explicitly asked her to leave, but they stopped assigning her tasks, stopped seeking her opinion, and her name disappeared from any new flyers or organizational charts. She still attended, sitting in the back row, nodding out of habit, but the eyes of the women who once called her Sister Evelyn were now filled with suspicion and distance. When someone would ask quietly, "Is she Madeline's mother?" the entire room would seem to hold its breath for a few beats before automatically changing the subject. Richard, my father, didn't lose his position, and no one confronted him directly, but at the residence council meetings, the people who used to shake his hand first gradually disappeared. A longtime friend of his sent a short, handwritten letter, asking only one question. Back then, why didn't you look at the cameras? Was there any reason good enough to refuse the truth? After that, he stopped attending, citing health reasons. I believe he knew. The family honor he had protected by pushing me away had now crumbled right at his feet, silently, slowly, and irreparably. For Betrayal, she lost her close friends. She was still living with Joshua, but I knew they were temporarily separated. Her old circle, the ones who used to call her Bree and invite her to every gathering, no longer tagged her in any posts. And me? I said nothing. I continued to go to work, live in my small apartment, and began preparing my applications to return to school. What was stolen from me that October night was now being returned. However slowly, however late, even if it couldn't bring anything else back. I didn't answer Cameron's texts, nor did I reply to his emails, just hoping to meet one more time to apologize. I no longer needed to hear anything else. A late apology is not a gift. It's just a burden shifted onto the shoulders of the one who was left behind. I sent a certified letter to my parents' house. Inside was a copy of the medical report from 2 years ago, the statement I had once submitted to a public defender, and a scan of the testimony from the emergency clinic that night. Each document was clipped with a handwritten note. Silence is never neutral. You chose the wrong side right from the start. I also forwarded the audio recording of my conversation with Cameron, the only time he appeared at my door in 2 years, and added a short line via email. I don't need to hear anything more. I survived. I didn't wait for a reply. And this time, I knew for sure no one could ever take my voice away again, because I didn't need their acknowledgement. I just needed them to live out the rest of their lives with the truth they had chosen to forget. I had grown accustomed to the quiet. After everything had spread like an underground stream, after every apology was returned by me in a sealed envelope, after Cameron sent one last email that I never answered, I thought that was the end. So when the doorbell rang late that afternoon, my heart jolted like an echo from a time I had buried under 3 layers of silence. I didn't open the door right away. I had heard the footsteps before the bell chimed. The sound wasn't rushed or hesitant, but slow and deliberate, as if the person had walked this path in their mind 100 times just to take the real steps today. I stood behind the thin wooden door, not out of hesitation, but because I wanted to know how my heart would still react when the past came ringing. When I opened it, he was there. Cameron. Still the same tall, lean frame, the same shirt with sleeves rolled to the elbows, the same old shoes that had walked alongside mine through exam seasons, rainy seasons, and the coldest winter RS of college. But today, he brought nothing familiar with him. No flowers, no gentle gaze, just a wrinkled brown envelope as worn as the 2 years buried in silence. I didn't ask why he had come. I stepped aside, leaving the door just wide enough for him to enter, but no more. In the small kitchen, we sat across from each other at the scuffed pine table. The place that had served as my desk, my dining table, my workspace, was now the receiving end of a past I had learned to leave untouched. I don't know where to begin, but I had to come. I had to say it. His voice was low, not from tiredness, but as if he were trying to pull a stone from his throat. I didn't reply. I didn't need to ask if he knew everything. He already knew. Somehow, the truth had reached him, through Betrayal, through Joshua, through a chain reaction that I never had to start. The only thing I wanted now wasn't validation, but to protect what was left of myself. He placed the envelope on the table and slid it gently toward me. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Every word inside the confession, the proof, the timeline, the witnesses I had already memorized since it first came to me 3 months ago. Cameron lowered his head, his hands clasped together. No words are enough. I know I was wrong, but by the time I knew, it was already late. I looked straight at him. No smile, no tears. I don't need to hear your story again, Cameron, because it's not what I was missing. What I was missing was the chance to tell my own story. That chance was taken away, and no one can give it back. He nodded, his eyes still fixed on the table. I didn't come to ask for us to get back together, but if you wanted to start somewhere else, if there was a second chance to be had, I'm still here. The space after that sentence stretched out like a blank page. I felt as if I were standing at a crossroads. On one side was the path I had walked for 2 years, lonely but clear, with no one to interfere, no one to make a decision for me. On the other was a slightly open door, holding both old love and the most profound heartbreak I had ever known. I stood up. I went into the bedroom. I opened the drawer where I kept all the evidence as a reminder that I had survived. Not because of anyone, but despite everyone. The stack of medical papers, reports, and audio recordings, I took out a blank sheet of paper and wrote a single line. Silence is not neutral. You made your choice, and so have I. I went back to the living room. He was still waiting. I handed him the paper. No explanation, no persuasion. He read it and said nothing more. When he left, there were no hugs, no promises. The door closed, like a second ending this time, one that I initiated. I looked at my phone screen. His name was still there, never deleted. I tapped it, not to call, but to finally sever the tie. My finger paused over the delete button. I confirmed, just once. I opened the window. The early spring breeze rustled the curtains. Outside, people were turning on their porch lights, and children were playing tag under the street lamps. No one knew that in a third-floor room, a silent war had just ended, not with gunshots or accusations, but with a decision that needed no applause. I didn't need them to come back. I just needed them to live the rest of their lives with the truth they had once denied, and I would go on living with my own truth, calm, whole, and wanting nothing more than the peace within.